and welcome to the Alumni Anthology webinar series, where we explore the passion projects, skills and expertise of our amazing alumni community. I'm your host, Claire Rhodes, and I'm joining you today from beautiful Dharawal country. This episode is called I Don't Want No Snobs, Art Appreciation for Everyone. And I am thrilled to be joined today by the incredible artist, curator and writer, Glenn Barkley. Welcome, Glenn. If you could please start by telling our audience a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Glenn Barkley and I'm actually here on Gadigal land, and I just want to acknowledge the elders past and present and emerging. I'm a curator, I'm an artist, I'm a writer. I'm an alumni of the University of Wollongong. I also worked there for about 10 years as the curator of the Art Collection. I'm a passionate advocate, I suppose, for art making, for artists. I like the idea of collecting, and I've been collecting artwork for a long time, but have been collecting things for a long time. So I have collections that I've kept that go back to my childhood up to things that I've bought in the past few weeks. So it's a bit of an obsession.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that obsession and that collection with us today. So to get started, I was hoping that I can see you've got some beautiful artworks just behind you there. If you could tell us a little bit about the artworks that you've chosen to share with us, a bit about those pieces and a bit about the artist.
So the works that I have here, and I can pick them up. I can pick them up because they're mine. If I was in a museum, I obviously couldn't. It's a series of bark paintings. They're not. There's two of them are by an artist called Marrnyula Mununggurr, who is an artist that I've worked with. She lives and works in Yolgnu in Arnhem Land, and I actually saw her work for the first time at the University of Wollongong. When I was at working with the collection, there were some works of Marrnyula's that had been purchased during some sort of teaching and sort of knowledge sharing between the faculty and Yirrkala print workshop, and there had been an exhibition of artists from Yirrkala and some paintings had been bought from that show, and they were paintings that I really loved, and they were actually of this same image. Then when I started working at the Museum of Contemporary Art, one of my first really big projects was called Making It New, which was in 2009. And it was a survey of Australian artists who had over 10 years practice. So that's a lot of people. So I think there was about 20 artists in the show. And one of the first people that I selected was Marrnyula, because I just really loved her work. One of the great things sometimes about being a curator is being able to bring the work of artists that you love to a broader audience. The interesting thing about Marrnyula is she had worked quite a lot with figuration. So she had used figures a lot in her work. She'd made paintings about AIDS in particular. She'd made paintings about working in an office. She'd done all these things using bark painting, but often sometimes going back to these sort of almost abstracted landscapes, which is what this work is. So when I did that show, we had a great sort of selection of works, but the thing that was really fortunate for me is I got to go to Arnhem Land, and I got to go to Yirrkala and to visit Marrnyula, and she took me with the art advisor there, Andrew Blake. We jumped in a troopie and we drove from Yirrkala to her country, which is about a couple of hours away. And I actually went to this place. So this painting depicts a waterhole, which is on her country. And I sort of think that maybe the sort of painting, people call this raak. So if you can see it up close and you can see how sort of multi-layered it is, they're done with like very fine brushes, layer over layer, color over color. And this actually depicts a waterhole near her country. And we went to visit this waterhole. So it was quite special. So the story about this waterhole is that people would go there. There was a particular tree that if you sort of pounded the root of the tree and you put it into water, it would stun the fish, and then you could sort of scoop the fish up. So it's like an important food source, and hence became quite a sacred, important site. So this painting is a sort of abstraction of the water. And then these here represent the net, but it could also be, the whole thing could be a net. I think that's what's sort of interesting about it, is it has a multitude.
It's absolutely stunning, and there's incredible sort of patterns and repetition and rhythm in that.
Yeah,
piece,
I do really love it. And I suppose the thing with anything is you start to become sort of interested in this particular pattern and how it's represented, and then Indigenous art from a place like Yirrkala or a place like Arnhem Land is so sort of diverse that you could get lost. So one of the things that I've sort of focused on is occasionally buying things, because I'm not wealthy by any means, occasionally buying bark paintings that depict this scene, because it's always quite different. So that's Marrnyula, but this is a slightly different version. And this is by Mununggurr, and I just, apologies if I've mispronounced that, but it's the same place, but a slightly different way of depicting it. And I think it's good just to get that sort of variation. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is I'm an artist myself, and my work is quite obsessive. And I find this obsession in this appealing for very tactile reasons to do with touch. But also, if you look closely, you may know there's an idea called the horror vacui, which is a fear of empty space. And I think there's a fear of empty space in this as well, which is much more related to sort of cultural depictions of place, but it's also this thing of like the painting going right to the edge and filling in every piece of space. And I also love how sort of tactile the whole thing is. It's not like a painting, it's an object. It's both a sculpture and a painting, which is what I love about bark painting. It's something in space. It's not a flat thing, it's a sculptural thing. So that's quite beautiful. And the great thing about bark paintings is they always want to go back to the shape of the tree that they were peeled off. So this is quite a complex, well, it's not that complex. I suppose it's quite simple, is like cutting the bark off the tree at a particular type of the season, but then sort of managing like when people would do that, so you don't sort of over harvest the barks. The barks are then flattened with heat in a fire. So it's put into a fire and then flattened, but just because of the very nature of them, they want to keep moving. They're always expanding and contracting. So it's almost like it's alive. So I'm sure if you did some sort of analysis today, I'm in Sydney and it's been raining for a few days, this is probably a different shape to what it was on the weekend. So when I put these on the wall, I've sort of loosely bracketed them because they're moving all the time. And if you try and fix them, you can quite often they get cracked because it'll be so rigid, it'll just crack the bark. So I love it too that it's not fixed, it's still alive as an artwork.
It's absolutely magical that you have something like that, like you say, is alive, is moving. It's like it's living and breathing in your home. It's quite incredible. And you've mentioned that this piece and the other one are created on bark. What kind of other tools or paints or materials would have been used to create them?
I think they would use sort of brushes that any artist might use, but also they sometimes make, and quite often, not sometimes, often make brushes using human hair. So they're very, very fine. Like if you can imagine, like if you cut a piece of your hair and then bound it into a stick and then made these incredibly, sort of like a cutting in brush, which is a sort of European brush that people use to cut in around windows. So it's quite a thin, almost like a whippy sort of brush, but made from human hair. So I did witness, luckily enough, I've been to Yirrkala a few times and seeing the art advisors have bags of human hair sort of in drawers, and people come in and ask for some because and then they give it to the artist to make these amazing brushes, which are beautiful sculptural objects in their own right. And then, yeah, these bark paintings are really meaningful for me just because of the fact of having been there and being at Yirrkala, which is such a special place, and the artists are really special, and the people that run the art centre there are really amazing people who have these incredible sort of collaborative relationships. So these sort of small bark paintings, they sort of wouldn't make it down to somewhere like Sydney, but if you go to Yirrkala, there's like really great works by really great artists in these really small formats, which are quite special. So I'm really happy to have it.
And what would you encourage people with a piece like that, for example? What would you encourage people to, you know, observe about that piece or understand about the artwork?
Well, I think that's the great thing about them, is that they work sort of on a multitude of levels, is that they do have this, they are sort of like a map in a certain sort of way, but they're also like a depiction of a particular landscape. So I think maybe I started to say is the thing I love about this and the sort of cross-hatching and everything, it's almost like sunlight falling on water. And when you went there, you could see the sort of wind sort of pushing across the waterhole, and you get these sort of cross-hatching that's actually happening on the water itself. So in some ways, it's almost like an impressionist painting, because it's this depiction of a very specific phenomena related to weather and related to the light at the time. So it is sort of like that as well. But it also works in a sort of Western, for want of a better term, sense of abstraction. It is this sort of beautiful abstract form, and European and American modernism, and by sort of osmosis Australian white European traditions in painting, there's this obsession with the grid. So in modernism in particular and modernist abstraction, you have this sort of formal relationship to the grid, and I like this is an ancient way of depicting a place using a grid in a way that to me is far more sophisticated than any sort of modernist tradition. It sort of got there well earlier, and sort of it has an organicness to the way it uses the grid, which is quite beautiful. And even the way that it's hard to see on Zoom, obviously, but you can see the way that the mark making almost becomes like a sort of topographical system, as you can see the way these lines, they hit these bumps and they sort of move with the bark as well. So it's a description, it's a sort of painterly description of the bark at the same time, which is almost like a map. And if you think this would have been made on the ground as well. So it's shifting on the ground too. So it's like a map of the place where it was made. It's not an easel. It's not painted on an easel. It's painted on the ground. So it has that sort of beauty to it too, that it depicts a place and it is of the place because the bark is of the place. So there you go. That's pretty, like, it's got everything you need. Do you know, painting can be done in different ways. Like painting can be done like with the whole body, or painting can be done with the elbow. Like it can be like this, or it can be like the whole of the body. But this is beautiful because it's painting with like the wrist and the finger. So you get that sense of the body that has made it as well.
It's quite amazing. And as you were talking, it made me think a lot about water. So water is something that we all encounter in different ways in our lives. You know, in Wollongong, we're by a beautiful ocean, but there's rain, there's rivers, there's creeks, there's even the water in our bath and whatnot. And thinking about the way that, what does it look like when it's still? What does it look like when it's moving? And you can see, looking at these artworks, like you said, the way that the water moves, the way that it, you know, ripples intersect each other and whatnot. So these pieces are a reminder for us, it seems, to be more mindful and present and really notice what's around us. Do you get that sense, or did you get that sense when you visited the site as well?
Oh yeah, you do get that sense. And you do, I like the idea that at the moment that a painting like this was made, I can see the artist being mindful and actually sort of losing themselves in the process, because it's quite process driven. Like if you see, it's like color over color, and in the sort of Yirrkala cosmology, all of those colors and different types of strokes and way of making marks, like that is all relating to like ancient traditions. So you have this idea of time being like, I don't know, almost like deep time that you can't sort of fathom, but then you also get the moment of time when it's made. So I think that's why I love them so much.
Yeah, look, they are absolutely incredible. And it's really fantastic for someone like myself who doesn't have the expertise and background that you have, to have you explain it in this way. Makes me see this and understand it in a completely different light. And I'm just thrilled and taken by the idea that you have this living, alive piece to enjoy in your home every day. It's just beautiful.
And look, I have my understanding of it, and I have my love of it, which is very much to do with actually working with Marrnyula, going to Yirrkala, remembering the journey, being fortunate enough to go onto her homeland, like all of those things. But then it's like I always say, when you sort of look at bark paintings, there's like a PhD in every painting, because the complexity of these marks I haven't even sort of touched upon. Like I can hint that they're there, but I don't, that complexity in some ways is beyond me. Yeah. But they have these incredible stories connected to them as well. So I do sort of encourage people. You can go to places like Yirrkala. They have a really fantastic website where you can actually go and look at paintings by Marrnyula, and you can look at other people from her community and her homeland who do this same painting. So there is a sense of artists being able to sort of interchange the way they're depicting this landscape, and they have really great stories about what this means, and they sort of delve a bit deeper into the sort of the custom and the cultural background of these. So people should do that. And Yirrkala is a really great art centre, and the online, not that I work for them, but their online facility is very useful, and I have bought things from it because it's almost too easy, and they just make such great work that you're not only supporting the art centre, but you're directly supporting the artists, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And so if people want to engage further, they can obviously explore Marrnyula and her work through Yirrkala. But if people want to follow you more and follow your curation and your creation of works, how can they do that?
Oh, Instagram. It's Glenn Barkley, one word, all lowercase, 2 N's in Glenn. Yeah, so follow me there. I have a gallery here in Sydney, Sullivan and Strumpf, there on Instagram as well. I have a gallery in Melbourne, Niagara Galleries, and a gallery in Wellington, Yana Miller, and I have a gallery in Miami, Mindy Solomon. So you can follow them all. Yeah.
Follow you around the world.
And then I'm actually currently working on a book, A Global History of Ceramics. So it's a busy time. So lockdown's been okay. I'm nearly done.
That's fantastic. That's so exciting, Glenn. Good luck with the book. Good luck with all of your incredible work. And thank you again for spending some time with us today and sharing your expertise with our community.
Yeah. So get onto the yirrkala.com shop and buy some art. It's there for the taking. Yeah.